Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry. Good evening, everyone. It's good to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to begin by welcoming members of the committee and welcoming our witnesses, one here in the room and one online. Thank you, Mr. Orb, and those watching on the World Wide Web. My name is Rob Black. I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm a senator from Ontario. I'd like to start by asking senators to introduce themselves around the table. Senator Simons.
I'm Senator Paula Simons from Alberta, from Treaty 6 territory.
Brent Cotter, Senator
Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry.
Sharon Bury, Senator
Good
from
evening, everyone.
Ontario.
It's good to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Sénateur du Québec de la division de Delormier.
Good evening and welcome. Marty Klein, Senator from Saskatchewan, Treaty 4 territory.
Chantal Petitclerc, sénatrice du Québec.
Yuan Pawu du Colombie-Britannique.
Victor O, Senator from Ontario.
Thank you, colleagues. Today, the committee is meeting on Bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. Our witnesses today are from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. We have Jasmine Guinette, Vice President, National Affairs, and online we have from the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, Mr. Ray Orb, President. Thank you for joining us today, folks. We'll begin with opening remarks from Mr. Guinée, followed by Mr. Orb. You'll have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. I'll signal when we're down to 1 minute. I'll raise my hand. And when you see two hands, it's time to wrap it up. So with that, the floor is yours, Mr. Guinée.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jasmine Guinette. I'm Vice President, National Affairs for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. I would like to thank the committee for this kind invitation. My presentation will be in my mother tongue, French. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business represents 97,000 members in all sectors of the economy and in all regions of the country. We have close to 5,000 farmer members. Of course, our farmers are a precious asset to our country. They work relentlessly to ensure that we have access to the best possible food. The CFIB, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, supports Bill C-234. Farmers are currently experiencing skyrocketing operating costs. For example, farmers must face high input cost, high fuel and energy cost, high insurance cost, high tax and regulatory cost. With Bill C-234, parliamentarians have the opportunity to help our farmers cope with the rising cost and help them to invest in the future of their farms. The level of optimism amongst farmers is very low. In our Business Barometer survey, which assesses the level of optimism amongst SME managers every month and for the past 30 years, the agricultural sector is currently the least optimistic. Rising cost, supply chain issues, cumbersome regulations, labor shortages, all these factors and many others mean that the confidence index of farm managers is very low. Our farmers want to protect the environment. The land is their source of livelihood. 90% of farmers protect the environment primarily for personal reasons, and close to 2/3 also do so for economic reasons. In a recent survey that we organized amongst our farmer members, 82% of respondents said that the federal carbon tax was having a negative impact on their businesses. The carbon tax reduces their financial ability to make technological investments aimed at reducing emissions and improving their farm's environmental performance. Applying the carbon tax to propane and natural gas punishes farmers for using products that are essential and for which there's no widely and affordable accessible alternative. So CFIE members are supporting this bill. We would like that this bill be adopted without amendment by the Senate. Although the current federal carbon tax includes exemptions for fuels used for agricultural purposes, farmers are facing major cost increases and rising propane and natural gas prices. This bill provides federal tax exemptions for propane and natural gas used, for example, for grain drying and barn heating. The exemptions provided for in the bill are crucial. By supporting Bill C-234, you have the opportunity to send a clear message to the agricultural sector that you are aware of their cost challenges and the key role they play. Thank you for your interest. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Mr. Orb. Mr. Orb, the floor is yours. And your mute is, you're on mute, Mr. Orb.
Yes, thank you, Senator Black. I hope you can hear me. Thanks for the invitation once again. My name is Ray Orb, and I'm president of the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, known as SARM. And I was born and raised and lived in a small farming community of Cupar, which is northeast of Regina, and it has a population of about 625 people. I'd like to thank the Standing Committee on Agriculture for the opportunity to share our association's thoughts as it studies Bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. Our membership is made up of Saskatchewan's rural municipal governments, and SARM has been the voice of rural Saskatchewan for over 100 years. And today I'll share the perspective of those we represent by sharing our thoughts on how the bill being proposed will impact our livelihood in Saskatchewan in a positive way. Bill C-234 picks up where C-206 left off in the last Parliament before the federal election, and 206 was passed by the House of Commons but was not fully approved by the Senate. As we're supportive of the previous bill, we are also supportive of Bill C-234, and the bill will provide much needed economic relief for our members, freeing up the working capital they need to implement innovation on farms. Grain dryers are used to help dry wet grains so it can be properly stored. In recent years, Canada has had particularly wet falls, creating a need to use grain dryers. In 2020, for example, grain dryers were running for a record amount of time, and farmers paid more than the federal government carbon tax estimate. Recent studies have shown that Saskatchewan farmers can expect to lose 8% of their total net income to the carbon tax. And for a household managing 5,000-acre grain farm in Saskatchewan, this could take the form of between $8,000 to $10,000. Our members have been very concerned about the impact of the federal carbon pricing system on unavoidable energy inputs like fuel to dry grain or heat livestock facilities. We've argued for years that producers cannot pass these additional costs along to our customers and that they further reduce our financial viability. This additional cost of carbon taxation does not help to solve the problem of carbon emissions. Saskatchewan has some of the greenest agriculture producers in the world. Most Saskatchewan cropland is zero-till. This means that our producers are already using a low disturbance direct seeding system. Not only does zero-till agriculture sink more carbon, but it also reduces soil erosion and the amount of fuel required on farms. The Saskatchewan Soil Conservation Association has been studying carbon sequestration for years, and through its research, they found that Saskatchewan producers sequester about 9.64 million new tons of carbon dioxide every year, over 28 million acres that are seeded every year in the province of Saskatchewan. Taxation on food production is short-sighted and not a solution. If we don't work together to find better solutions, we will see even more decreases in the number of farmers and farms in Canada, and we will lose the food security that we already have. In closing, on behalf of Saskatchewan's RMs and rural Saskatchewan, we thank the Senate Standing Committee for the opportunity to lend our voice to this important conversation. Look forward to continued dialogue as we all work together to further the best interests of all Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orb, and thank you to both of our witnesses for your testimony. We'll proceed now with questions from senators. Before I move to that, I'd like to remind and ask members and witnesses to refrain from leaning too close to the mic to prevent feedback from the earpiece as well. This will avoid any sound feedback to our colleagues behind us that could negatively impact their health and the work that they're doing. As has been our previous practice, I'd remind each senator that you've got 5 minutes to ask the question and get the answer, so keep your questions and answers brief. And we will move to a second and third round as may be necessary. So we'll start with our Deputy Chair, Senator Simons.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais essayer de poser ma question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to ask my first question in French to Mr. Guenette. I'm not very bilingual, but I really need to find opportunities to practice. Thank you. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business, you have lots of members who are not farmers. And I'm afraid that if you decide to come up with exceptions for farmers, maybe that's the first stage. And then other businesses would also ask why the same doesn't apply to them. Why don't we come up with small exceptions for this business and not for this enterprise and not others? I think that when the tax was introduced, farmers received an exemption for some products that are used on the farms, gasoline and diesel, for example. We think that it's natural to extend the extension for propane and natural gas to farmers. At this time, we've not asked our members in other sectors of activity whether or not they would like a similar exemption. We only put the question to our farmer members whether or not they would like that exemption. Of course, most of our farmer members are saying that the costs keep rising, even more so considering the inflation we are facing now. There are lots of factors at play. So we are supporting this bill for our farmer members, and we have not put the question to other members in other sectors to find out whether or not they want a similar exemption. There is no one who would like to pay a tax. That's why I'm afraid that everyone will want to avoid paying, but it's a transparent mechanism to send a message to all members that it's necessary to reduce carbon in the economy.
Most of our farm members say that they cannot pass any cost to their clients, and so they are feeling that contrary to other sector, other type of businesses that could eventually pass down those costs to their customer, our farm members say that they cannot do that. So the impact of those taxes are more felt by our members in the ag sector as opposed to maybe other businesses. But again, we have not asked our other members if they would or would not support such exemptions for their own sectors of activity.
I suspect if you ask, they will say yes. Do I have time for one more? For Mr. Orb, then. We heard last week from the commercial grain dryers in Ontario who have commercial grain drying operations that are not included in the terms of this bill. But I was just wondering, Saskatchewan has such a strong history of cooperative farming and co-op movements for farmers. Is there any capacity for, even for your organization, to facilitate the purchase of very modern, up-to-date, more energy-efficient grain dryers that farmers could use cooperatively, or is that just not practical when you're talking about grain farms as large as they are on the prairies?
I really appreciate the question, but I don't think it's practical. We have many farmers now that are very large farmers, and I'll give you an example of one of my neighbors. So they farm, they farm about 6,000 acres, so that would be about 2,500 hectares, I guess, and they actually dry all of the grain on their farm, so they start harvest early, and they want to dry their grain not only to preserve the grain, but that actually, it does provide them with better quality grain, and they're able to dry the grain during the night when they're not harvesting. So the next morning their facilities are all empty, and they're quite large facilities, and they're very modern grain dryers in the sense that they're using the best technology that we have available that's affordable for farmers. And I know as time goes on, we're going to get more innovation, and we're going to find more ways to dry grain. But right now, this is all we have. And so those farmers are so busy, there's no way to cooperate very much with neighbors, because all the neighbors are trying to do the same thing. So it's a good question, but it's not practical right now.
Thank you, Senator Simon. Senator Klein, followed by Senator O.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to both guests. Mr. Orb, you have, my questions for Mr. Orb. Mr. Orb, you've emphasized that the different weather conditions farmers face in Saskatchewan should be taken into consideration when rolling out federal policies such as the clean fuel regulations. Indeed, Saskatchewan's farming sector experiences long and harsh winters, making it necessary to use heating systems to safeguard stored cereals and pulses, protect livestock, and maintain optimal growing conditions in greenhouses and barns. It's a two-part question here, but can you elaborate on how this particularly affects farms and rural municipalities? And can you share with this committee the underestimated challenges between Saskatchewan and regions with milder climates, and any disadvantages this bill would create for Saskatchewan farmers?
Well, just to answer the last part of the question, I don't think this bill creates any disadvantage to farmers. I think it obviously helps a lot of farmers. I know there aren't as many farmers in rural Saskatchewan that heat their barns, perhaps as there would be in other parts of the country. We don't have as much intensive livestock. I'm thinking of hog barns and poultry. We do have some, and we have some dairy farms as well. But it would be very helpful for them if they would get an exemption too. And yes, we do have cold winters, although, the winter ahead is being forecast by Environment Canada as not being as harsh as we've had in the last few years. So we'll have to wait to see for that till that happens. But each year is very different. And I mentioned going back to 2020. That was a year where a lot of the grain was dried in this province, and it really created a hardship for farmers that are already buying the fuel to dry the grain and having to pay a carbon tax, and then actually paying GST on top of the carbon tax. And I think there could be relief provided to farmers that way. This year it wasn't quite as severe, but at the same time we have a higher level of carbon tax now. Now we have a level of $65 a ton. So some of the reports that were done a few years ago are actually outdated. The costs to the farmers are a lot higher. So we're hopeful that this bill does pass, and it may be too late for this year for some of the farmers. There's still some farmers drawing grain, there's no doubt. Some farmers need to heat their livestock buildings, but we're looking forward for sure for next year to have it in place for next harvest season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're done. Senator Klein, you're done. Thank you. Senator O, followed by Senator Wu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. My question is the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act currently exempt both diesel fuels and gasoline for agriculture purposes, which by some estimates comprise 80% of agriculture fuel emissions. And yet, we are hearing pushback on the idea that propane and natural gas should be exempted when these are cleaner fuel than the diesels and gasoline and only make up about 18% of agriculture fuels emission. Question is, why would the rationale for exempting the diesel fuels and gasoline and not also apply to propane and natural gas?
Ben, comme je l'ai dit dans mes... Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for that question. As I stated during my remarks, what we are hearing from our farmer members is that they are facing lots of pressure when it comes to cost, particularly the high prices of propane and natural gas. So this bill, if it passes, will give a lot of relief to our farmers who, once again, are undergoing a lot of pressure. So the position of the Confederation is that this bill be supported because it will help Canadian farmers to deal with the increasing cost.
Mr. Ong?
Mr. Orb, do you have any response to that?
Yeah, thanks. I would like to answer Senator Zo's question. I don't think there should be pushback to asking for exemption on propane and natural gas drying because you're right, they are clean fuels. I think it's something we need to consider as well. Without exemptions, and we were fortunate, we were one organization that we did ask the federal government to exempt the other fuels that you mentioned that are used on farms quite regularly, namely diesel and gasoline. We were pleased that there were exemptions on those fuels. But other countries around the world, and I give one example, the United States is one of their biggest trading partners. They don't have their farmers don't have a tax on carbon. And so our farmers are becoming disadvantaged by this, and it's starting to make our farmers uncompetitive with countries, with farmers in the United States, because we trade every day. There's a lot of grain that goes back and forth across the borders. Our international markets as well. If we have these taxes on our farmers, it puts our farmers at that disadvantage, and I don't think that is fair. And something needs to be considered to remove these taxes on these important things that are done on the farm every year.
I have one more question for
Go ahead.
Gany. I have a question for you. What percentage of your members use natural gas and propane to fuel on-farm grain dryer? Any idea?
No, I could look into our data, but I don't have the answer for you this evening, unfortunately. But I can get back to you if I have that information.
Great. If you could get back, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I could.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator O. Senator Wu, followed by Senator Bury.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to witnesses. For Mr. Gwinnett, what is the position of the CFIB on the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act?
We have asked last year in a survey what our members are thinking on the carbon tax. 52% oppose the carbon tax. 25% support it if it would be revenue neutral. 13% fully support carbon pricing. And the rest of the respondents did not have a firm opinion on the question.
So would it be correct to say that the CFIB opposes carbon pricing?
We would like to see carbon pricing be fair to our members. what we have said many times is small businesses contribute significantly to the carbon tax. When the carbon tax was introduced in 2019, rebate programs were promised to them, and those were never delivered. And so the ask that we make as often as possible is that what was promised to the small business community, which included rebate programs, be implemented to them so that they can benefit from rebates like household are benefiting at the moment.
Given the current situation, there is pressure among your membership to get rid of the carbon tax, not just for the agriculture sector, but for other sectors as well. How would you compare the relative difficulty of hard to decarbonize sectors? We're looking at crop drying as one specific example, but there are other very hard to decarbonize sectors in the Canadian economy, like very large industries, cement, transportation, steel making, and so on. How would you compare the relative difficulty of crop drying to these other hard to decarbonize sectors?
I'm not sure I can fully answer your question, Senator. Unfortunately, what we are hearing from our farm member is that at the moment there is no affordable or available alternatives to propane and natural gas, and hence why they tell us that this bill is important for them. They are under a huge amount of financial pressure, and what we are hearing through our survey and communication with our members is that this bill is needed for them to give a little bit of breathing room to our farm members. So that's how I would answer your question, Senator.
And the breathing room that they have, if this bill passes, is at $65 per ton, but it goes up by $15 a ton every year, which means if we have this 8-year sunset period, that's another, what, 8 times 15, $120, right? So that's $185 per ton. Would it be even more difficult for your membership at that time to get on board with pollution pricing 8 years from now? Because it would not have had the benefit, if I can put it that way, of incrementally adjusting to the rising price of pollution.
Yes. I'm not sure having your cost increase as a business owner is a benefit. But what I would say is that the sunset clause will allow businesses to implement new ways of doing business. New technology will most likely be available at a lower cost, giving that time, that transition period for businesses to adapt. And allowing businesses to keep more of their hard-earned money will allow them to invest more in those new and greener technology.
Thank you. And for Mr. Orb, very quickly, if you could provide...
Can we add you to the second round?
Second
Okay,
round,
that's
thank
5
you.
minutes. Thank you. Senator Bury, followed by Senator Delphond.
Thank you so much to our witnesses for coming and providing such interesting testimony. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Jeanette, because you seem to have some numbers that we can get, and I appreciate your having that availability. I'm just going to ask about, you presented some surveys of your members. You have 5,000 farmers. And I wanted to know if you had any disaggregated data on the effect of this bill for women, youth, and more racialized Canadians, because we've been tasked as legislators to make sure that there is equity and we want to know the effect of various maneuvers on certainly different populations. Do you have any of that information?
I don't have that information with me today, unfortunately, Senator, but I can certainly look at what information we have with my colleagues at the office and would be more than happy to provide that information by email later. But today, I don't have that information, unfortunately.
Thank you. Mr. Orb?
You're asking me about information that we have on equity?
Yes.
No, we don't actually do research on that. We know there are lots of farm families, their husband and wives that are operating as partnerships, but we don't have any specific information that you're asking for. Sorry.
Okay, so I have another question for both the witnesses. So as part of the Government of Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan 2030 Emissions Reduction Plan, Clean Air, Strong Economy, the Agricultural Clean Technology, the ACT program offers support to farmers. Now, what percentage of your members applied to this ACT program in recent years? Do you have any information on that?
I don't have that specific answer for you, unfortunately.
And Mr. Orb, do you know of any of your members who applied and received this program?
No,
Or
sorry,
were
we
approved?
haven't. No, we don't have that information either. We know that our farmers have been made aware of those programs, but we don't know how many have actually applied.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Delphond, followed by Senator Cotter.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
both witnesses, it's always interesting to benefit from their messages, and I think I see they are quite persistent in their message. They read word by word what they said in October 2022 before the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agro-Food, which I understand means that nothing that they've heard ever since was changed their mind. So, Mr. Orb, my first question is for you. In your presentations, you referred to recent studies have shown that Saskatchewan farmers can expect to lose 8% of their total net income to the carbon tax. Would you be able to provide to us the data that support that these studies that you have conducted in order for us to understand exactly how you came out to 8%?
Yeah, definitely. We could provide that to you. It was study was done by a farm organization here in Saskatchewan, so we can provide that to the Senate committee members.
It refers to a farm which has 5,000 acres of grain, I suppose. So I guess you will provide some data about what type of farms we're referring to. Are you familiar with the a new computation system that was set up by the Saskatchewan government that helps farmers to assess the cost of electricity to dry grain and how to save money?
What study was that, or what program was that?
It's found on the internet. It's the Agriculture Department of Saskatchewan, and it provides farmers an opportunity to estimate the cost of energy to dry grains, depending on the type of dryers you use.
I haven't seen that. If it's an updated report, I haven't actually seen that, but I will definitely search for that.
It's a program you can run on the internet. And so, to your knowledge, have you seen in the rural municipalities of Saskatchewan many farmers converting their old dryer for new dryers that are 30% more efficient? Or is that not something which is happening?
Yeah, I think farmers are doing that naturally because they're, obviously they're trying to become more efficient. And in recent years, the price of propane has gone up, and the part about the propane fuel is that it does follow demand. So in harvest time, the propane always gets more expensive than it does off season, and the problem with that is that farmers can't often store it on their farm ahead of time. They have to buy it during harvest. So that ongoing increase of price happens every year, and the more farmers dry their grain, the higher the price of propane gets. So the price of the carbon tax is attached to the price of propane. And so that's an issue for farmers too. Many farmers are drying using natural gas, and our province has done a better job, I think, in recent years of providing a better network of supply for natural gas than they have in the past. But in some areas of the province, farmers aren't able to get natural gas, and so they have to use propane, which is at a higher expense. The other issue, of course, is electricity, which I don't believe is part of this exemption. And so everyone has to realize when you operate a grain dryer, you're using lots of electricity as well, and that's something that farmers have to pay on their own. So we've been looking at other farm groups even across the country, and we looked at Ontario, the grain farmers in Ontario, and their costs are a lot higher than ours are. And so I know that they're asking for exemption too, the same as we are. So we're kind of keeping in touch with that as much as we can with other farm groups.
Thank you. Monsieur Guénette, de vos membres, j'imagine qu'il y en a.
Mr. Gannett, I believe that some of your members are in Quebec and in British Columbia amongst your 6,000 farmers. And these 6,000 farmers, are they supporting this bill, even though they are not subject to carbon pricing? Most of our farmer members are supporting Bill C-234, even though the federal law doesn't apply in British Columbia and Quebec. Of course, the system in Quebec is different from that in other provinces, and like British Columbia. When we put the question to our farmer members, most of them say they support such exemptions for the sector.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cotter, followed by Senator Petitclerc.
Thank you. I want to ask the question about 8 years from now. Two parts of it, and in some ways this is channeling Senator Wu's question. Firstly, what will be the state of affairs of farmers who would benefit from this exemption 8 years from now in terms of their grain drying strategy? Mr. Orb, I think mostly about grain drying when I think about this bill. And my second question, and I'd really like you to answer yes or no on this, is you indicate you support the bill, which I would interpret to mean then that you also support the sunset of the bill in 8 years' time. Would you be able to confirm that for me, each of you?
We support the bill as is, including its sunset clause. The sunset clause is a signal to farm businesses that things will change, that it's important for them to find ways to find alternative technology and solution for drying grains, for example. So it's an important signal that things will change. But right now, as we speak, what we are hearing from our membership is that farm businesses need to be supported because of the cost increase that they are facing, and this bill addressed that for them. And so,
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Orb?
Yes, thank you. You know, definitely a really good question. 8 years from now, I really believe that agriculture in this country will be a lot different than it looks right now. I think as time goes on, and farmers have proven this over the years, they've become much more efficient. Often that is because of adversity. They're finding different ways to be more efficient, more ways to be productive on their farm, producing more, using less in a lot of cases. And so with that has gone, innovation. We have companies in Saskatchewan now that make a lot of equipment that allows farmers to do that. I use the example of zero till, where farmers can buy the machines that put the seed in the ground with the fertilizer, done it very efficient and actually very environmentally friendly way. I think as time goes on, the good part about the sunset clause, it will give farmers a chance to become more innovative and more efficient. Things naturally occur that way, I think. And I am very confident that in 8 years, there will be many farmers who will be actually drying their grain using different technology. It might not be anything close to what it is now. And I think we do support the bill, of course, but we definitely support the 8-year sunset clause. I think it was very wise to include that.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Anything else? You have a couple minutes. Okay, thank you. Senator Petitclerc, followed by Senator Mockler.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Ma question va être pour vous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question goes to Mr. Gannett. If you'd allow me, I'll ask you to carry out this exercise with me. If we put aside the bill, for example, and we think about the best approach we should take to help the farmers and also to incentivize or promote research or transitioning towards best practices. I say that because some people talked about the exemption. We have before us exemptions, but we've talked about tax credits, the technology programs, the rebate programs. So, do you think that the exemption is the best approach if we were to forget about the bill in the absolute? I'll try to answer your question, Madam Senator, the best I can. First of all, recently, we sent a submission as part of consultations of the 2023-2028 Agriculture Consultation Framework. So we sent out a submission to our members asking them a lot of questions on their priorities, some of their most important issues. One of the top priorities they mentioned was the tax burden that is very heavy. That's one of the reasons why we are supporting the bill, Bill C-234, which is being discussed today. When we ask our members what they are doing to reduce their carbon footprint, of course, this bill is one of the items that could be part of a series of things that could be done. For example, we are often told that they are changing their tilling techniques. They will preserve forest, trees, green spaces, humid zones. They will be reducing the electricity consumption. They will change the products that they use for their tilling activities. The farmers are saying that they are already doing a lot to improve their practices. And that Bill C-234, if it passes, will provide them with more tools because they will have more financial resources to implement more good practices aimed at reducing their carbon footprint. I don't know if I'm answering your question the way you want. Maybe not exactly. But the CFIB is taking a position based on the comments, surveys, and information we've received from our members. Our position on the current bill Our current position on the bill is based on the surveys we've done amongst our membership. And when we talk to our farmer members, the tax burden is a major burden. And as I said before, lots of practices have improved over the years, and they are still looking for ways of improving their practices. As I said during my introductory remarks, the land is their source of livelihood. Sometimes these are family businesses that are inherited from their parents and which they want to hand over to their kids. So they want to keep it in the long term. I'm sorry I went over my time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Mockler.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Vous deux, Monsieur Gannett, je veux vous féliciter.
I want to thank the two of you and congratulate you on your leadership, Mr. Orb.
To each and every one of you. First, have you been consulted, Monsieur Gannett? Est-ce que vous avez été consulté?
Mr. Gannett, were you consulted before the government proposed this tax?
How important, no doubt all of us around the table knows that, how important the leadership of municipalities are across, not only in Saskatchewan, but also dans le Nouveau-Brunswick and across Canada. Have you been consulted by the government on this matter of that said tax?
Yes, we have been consulted. We actually, we did give a presentation to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture last year, if that's what you're talking about. We actually, we also met with the member of parliament that presented the bill as a private member's bill. I think it was 2 years ago, and we were informed by that gentleman that that bill was coming to parliament, and so we were looking at it then, and we were looking at ways to, for our farmers to be able to save some of the taxes and not have to pay the kind of taxes that I mentioned earlier on that we're making our farmers non-competitive with other countries that we're trying to sell into their markets as well. So I think there's been a lot of consultation on this, and we're glad that the Senate now is asking for further consultation, and we're still of the same opinion that we would like this to be passed. We would like this benefit to come to farmers as soon as possible.
Mr. Orb, my question to you, thank you for that answer, but my question to you is, before that private member's bill, were you consulted by the government in preparing their budget in respect to the tax bill that we have before us?
I actually don't think so. No, I think it was. We didn't hear anything from the federal government on this. We've been consulted on other things in the last, since 2015, of course. But as far as I know, this wasn't one of them.
Okay, Monsieur Gannett, est-ce que vous avez été consulté?
Mr. Gannett, were you consulted about this tax, consulted by the government? Thank you, Mr. Senator, for your question. I do not recall taking part in any consultations from the government specifically on this bill. But as my colleague said, we were called to appear to testify and present a position on the bill at the Agriculture Committee.
On my part, in an earlier testimony, the Agricultural Carbon Alliance told us that farmers are already investing in solar, wind, and other non-GHG emitting energy sources where they can. And that's as late as last 2 weeks ago. I had roundtables with some farmers in New Brunswick, and I'll say Atlantic Canada because there were a couple from Nova Scotia, and they were concerned about the cost of food and the cost of inputs to produce agricultural products. So my question to you is, however, in many instances, changes in technology and the necessary infrastructure to support new alternatives will take time. In their view, the Agricultural Carbon Alliance told us, in their view, the exemption provided by this legislation will both help to bridge the transition gap and to ensure farmers have the resources to invest in new technology. My question to you, do you agree or disagree with this position, and why?
Nous sommes d'accord avec cette.
We agree with that position. I believe that the sunset clause has sent an important signal that at the same time things are changing while giving time to the farmers to adapt. They need that time to change some of their practices, and that clause does exactly that.
Mr. Orb, very quickly.
Yes, thank you. We are not aware of the position of the agriculture carbon lights, but we appreciate being asked this question. Nevertheless, our farmers and our rural municipalities in this province and SARM is supportive of our province moving ahead with green energy, and I'll name solar, and to some extent nuclear energy now, and wind power, of course. And so we have signed on to an agreement with the province to promote this. But many of our farmers, not able to do this unless, there's some investment from the federal government. So this idea of a rebate right now, I think will put some money into farmers' pockets, and hopefully some of them through investment in their own innovation on their farms and cooperating with other manufacturers in this province can make things better in that sense, become more efficient and use alternative energy whenever they can.
Thank you very much. Moving on to round two, and we have Senator Simons and 4 individuals. Let's limit it to 4 minutes at most, and we will be going over with this panel by a little bit, but we do have the time. So Senator Simons, you have 4 minutes.
My question this time is for Mr. Orb. Senator Delphine sort of was making a point, I think, that if there's tax relief for farmers in Ontario, they would have a competitive advantage over farmers in Quebec. And this made me think of something else, which is, of course, if Saskatchewan had its own carbon tax, it could carve out all the exemptions for farmers that it wanted. Has your rural municipalities organization spoken at all to your provincial government about an option for Saskatchewan to create its own carbon tax, which it could then tailor to the needs of Saskatchewan farmers if it wanted to?
No, actually, we haven't talked to our province about carbon tax because we know they're not in favor of a carbon tax. They're certainly not in favor of the federal carbon tax. And, of course, we also see now the federal opposition making statements. If they are elected, they will get rid of the carbon tax. So our members, I think, are looking for what will happen on the federal front. And we haven't been talking to our province about this. Our members have passed several resolutions that they oppose the tax on carbon and said we think farmers should be rewarded in this province for all the reasons I stated earlier for actually sequestering carbon. There should be a carbon credit scheme or an offset scheme that rewards farmers in our province and not punish them.
Right. Well, I mean, I happen to agree with you that I think farmers ought to be rewarded for soil sequestration. But just so that we're very clear, what you actually support is the elimination of a carbon tax, of any kind. So what would you do then? What would be your public policy suggestion? I mean, farmers know better than anyone that our climate is changing dramatically. Whether that's droughts or floods or fires, farmers are on the bleeding edge of climate change. So what would you propose then as a way to incent people to use less carbon?
We prefer rewarding farmers rather, whether it be tax credits or business loans, low interest loans, things like that. Innovation. There should be a way for the major polluters in every province to pay an innovation fund. That money could be used for research to make farming more efficient in the sense of lowering greenhouse gases. We believe penalizing people is not helping, and we're actually in a food security crisis right now. If you look around the world, a lot of the countries are looking for Canada, and particularly provinces like Saskatchewan, to supply the world's food. So putting more taxes on carbon, we know that's actually going up. It'll be going up again, and it'll be going up again until it reaches the limit for the federal government, and that will put a lot of producers out of business. Maybe we'll be bringing food in from other countries, more than we are now. So that's not a good situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Simons. Senator Wu, followed by Senator Klein.
If I could follow up with Mr. Orb, your theory of change, if I can extrapolate, is that producers in the farm sector will reduce their carbon out of their own self-interest, such that in 8 years, you've said that we'll be in a much better situation. There will be much more energy efficient, crop drying, and things will be just a lot more hunky-dory. And I was going to ask you, if that is the case, why do we need a carbon tax in any sector? But I think you've answered the question now. You don't think there should be a carbon tax in any sector because presumably other sectors will also act purely out of their desire to be more efficient and maybe benevolence or self-interest, and they don't need incentives to lower their carbon emissions. Is that a fair summation of the way you see how we deal with the problem of climate change?
Yeah, I think it is. And if we go back to what the parliamentary budget officer has said, the carbon tax that we have in this country is not working. It's actually not setting out what it was supposed to do as far as what the federal government wants. It's really, I think it's inefficient to tax business people across this country, and especially farmers, and to expect them not to have to absorb the costs. And many farmers are becoming more cash strapped, especially this year in our province of Saskatchewan. The crops weren't as good as they were in the past. We've had a big area of the province that has been drought. We've had that before, of course, but I think we should have a sober look at this. The way the taxes are collected on the farms, as far as the carbon tax, it's just not a system that's condoning farmers to be able to thrive.
Thank you. And if I could go back to a question that Senator Mockler asked the two of you, he was wondering if you had been consulted on this bill, and presumably he was referring to this private member's bill, and your answer was no, but if you can clarify that you were answering no to consultation on the private member's bill.
We were sorry.
Please go ahead, sir.
We were consulted on the bill when it came to the House of Commons, when the committee got it, but we weren't consulted by the government before the bill came into being.
Well, thank you for that, and it would be extraordinary for the government to want to consult with stakeholders on a private member's bill. I put that just for the record rather than as a question, but it's clear to me that the question you were answering refers to this bill, which is a private member's bill for which the government has no responsibility.
Yeah. Could I just answer that, if you don't mind, Senator?
Please.
I guess what we're getting at is that we didn't think there need to be a private member's bill that the government of Canada could have done this on their own. They could have brought a bill in themselves to exempt. They could have brought that to Parliament, but instead there was a private member's bill, and we're thankful that the bill has ended up in the Senate. But the government of Canada did not do this on their own. This was a private member's bill that came through the House of Commons.
Thank you. Senator Dalfont.
Mr. Chair, I stand to be corrected. It's not the Saskatchewan Agriculture Department, it's Saskatch Energy. And it's on their website, and you can find it. Equipment, Your Farm, Grain Estimator. But the Manitoba government provides the same program on its website. That being said, my question is for Monsieur Guenette. Monsieur Guenette, vous avez dit que vos membres sont...
Mr. Gannett, you said that your members all agree with the bill before us. I imagine that most of your members are in Ontario. The Association of Grain Producers in Ontario came before this committee to say that they were not in favor of this bill as written, because they wanted to pay only for a third of their members, and the other third had to be paid because they use part of it for grain drying. So should I take it that your members agree with the bill as it is written, or do they want that a third of the grain producers of Ontario to be included?
It was Mr. Hurst. It was not the grain farmers of Ontario that said that.
The grain producers, it's the producers.
No, it was not.
Grain producers?
No, it was Mr. Hurst, which is the OABA, Ontario Association of Agricultural Folks. It's Russell Hurst, who was.
I understand.
I just want to clarify that.
Mr. Chair. I understand the clock has stopped when you make that
Russell
correction.
Hurst is with the Ontario Agribusiness Association.
Sorry?
Russell Hurst is with the Ontario Agribusiness Association.
Agribusiness
Yes,
Association.
it's not
Thank you.
grain farmers.
Thank you, thank you. Anyway, you referred to the members of his group and the data they had about grain producers. And so I guess I start again because my time was eat up, so I'll start again. So so what's the answer, Monsieur Guénette? Est-ce que vos membres qui ne sont
Most of the members from Ontario who will not benefit from this bill, are they in support of the bill as it is written? The other associations can take whatever position they want to take. It's up to them. When we put the question to our members to find out whether or not they supported Bill C-234 as presented before members of this committee this evening, most of them said yes. Did you explain the content of the bill? Are they different positions? When we communicate with our members, a survey is an open question. We give them the most information possible. We give them the highlights of the bill. We ask them whether or not they support the bill, and that is what we did in this case. And the cost of imports, as you say, is increasing for farmers everywhere. Do you know the percentage that the carbon price represents in terms of input price? Is it 10, 15, 20%? Unfortunately, I do not have that information for you this evening. If I told you that it's less than 1%, will it change your position? When we put the question to our members, the situation they are experiencing on the ground every day when they wake up to go work on their farms, they say that the cost of inputs are increasing, the costs of energy, propane, natural gas are increasing, and for them, adoption of Bill C-234 will help them. So that's the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit, right? Well, we're talking about the bill being studied by the senators, and we would like the bill to be adopted without amendment for it to become the country's law so that our members can benefit from these exemptions. I understand that you know that the carbon price is a significant incentive because in 80 years, many people will transition to other technologies because it will be so expensive that they will have no choice. So I understand that you may want to ask for an extension. So can you give them a clear message that it ends after 80 years? I do not know whether all businesses will have changed their production practices, but in any case, this gives businesses time to adopt and find great technologies for their operations. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's being no further questions on the list, I would like to thank our witnesses today for your participation. Mr. Orb online and Mr. Guénette on in person. Your assistance with the committee's examination of the bill is much appreciated. I know that one or both of you have been tasked with sending some information. We'd appreciate that in writing as soon as possible, like tomorrow if possible, and send it through the clerk. That would be great. So to summarize, colleagues, we've heard both positive and negative aspects of this bill. We have no more witnesses scheduled for. Go ahead. We have no more witnesses scheduled for this examination of this bill. I believe we've had, and I have it here. I believe we've had 22 witnesses over 4 meetings, including tonight's meetings. And many of those witnesses came from folks that you've suggested to us. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Some have said no when we approached them. We have had a number that have said no. So just so you know. We have no further witnesses scheduled for Thursday. What would your desire be? Senator Wu and then Senator Simon.
I'm wondering, at a certain point, should we proceed in camera?
We will get there.
Okay.
We will get to in camera at some point. I would like
Okay.
this to be public, if that's possible. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
One thing that struck me about the testimony we've heard so far is that one of the central questions is the so-called technological frontier and how close we are to it, what we mean by the technological frontier, and whether that is simply about alternative technologies, whether it's about efficiencies, whether it's about other ways of reducing energy costs. And we haven't really heard, I don't think, from the producers of these types of equipment to give us a better sense of where they see the technological frontier and how much work needs to be done to push the frontier out such that farms can adopt those efficiency improving technologies sooner than the 8 years that's written into the bill. So I would propose, and we have some names that we can share with you, I would propose that we hear from some of these companies so that we have a better understanding of that critical issue.
What's the thought, wishes of our group? Is that do we wish to propose that or hope for that for Thursday?
If it's possible to find people who are willing to testify, I know that our clerk and our analyst have worked hard to find witnesses who've not always been able to be with us. I mean, I think I would like to hear that because people have told us over and over again, there is no alternative technology, but without hearing from the people who make the grain dryers or the farm heating systems even, I don't know if that's the case. I notice also that Senator Mockler is back with us, which is lovely. In addition to being a member of this committee, he's also, of course, the chair of National Finance. And I wonder, now that we have his handsome face back with us, if he could tell us a little bit about what National Finance is doing with this bill at some point.
If you'd like to do that now.
Yes, please. Thank you, Senator, for that important question. And I had the chance to share information with some of the senators around the table, what we're doing in finance. If we look at the order of reference that was given by the Senate of Canada on C-234, this act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, the Senate Agriculture and Forestry Committee was referred the entire bill. And if you look in the past, different committees have been given different order of reference, and other committees have opted to look at the order of reference. And when we looked at the order of reference, when it says that the Senate Agriculture and Forestry Committee was referred the entire bill, and then the Standing Senate Committee on National Finance being authorized to examine and report on the subject matter of the bill. So the subject matter of the bill versus the entire bill being referred to the committee, because of our responsibilities in finance, the steering committee, and we've met twice on this matter, we opted to say that the Agriculture and Forestry Committee was well equipped to do the proper report and table that report in the Senate. We have decided that we would respect what will be put forward by the Committee of Agriculture and Forestry.
Thank you. Senator Delphine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To come back do we need more witnesses? I'm certainly of the view, like Senator Simons and Senator Hu, that we need to hear more witnesses about the alternatives. And sometimes the word viable alternative is used. It's a kind of acknowledgement there are alternatives, but they're not necessarily viable. Where do we draw the line of what is viable? Is that what costs me nothing versus what costs me something that will take 10 years to pay on amortization? I don't know. But my office, in the last few days, has contacted a few, and I will share with all of you. I have copies of the list of people that are in the business of selling or promoting grain drying. One company is called Flamand Agricultures. They are based in, they have location in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and they sell grain dryers, and they describe itself as to being the most efficient grain dryers in the industry, saving you up to 20 to 30% on fuel cost. Apparently, they're available. Maybe it's a good marketing tool to appear before us. I don't know. But they'd be more than willing to come and explain to us that, and I have other list of professors that have researched that technology and others. So I would be glad to share with the committee. I don't know if they'll be available for in the coming today or tomorrow, but certainly we could do other things and come back in a week or two. But I suggest I could share with you all these names. Thank you. And also the Library of Parliament has provided to me today a list of companies and individuals who manufacture, sells, or design efficient, relatively low-emission grain dryers in Canada. So I'll add that to the list.
Thank you. All right, colleagues. Anything else on Paula? Senator Simons?
I think I think these are the only more witnesses we should hear. I don't think we need to hear any more from people who are in favor or opposed to the general principle. I think we've had a good airing of that from a really good range of witnesses, from professors to farmers to everyone in between. But I think to hear about the technology would be useful and practical. And I don't know if Agri did that kind of thing, but I think we ought. I think limited to that.
Thank you. So we do want to have a short in camera, but so we'll proceed to see if we can get witnesses for Thursday, first panel. I also wonder whether our critic of the bill would be interested in speaking. The critic of this bill. As one of our witnesses.
I think I will. I prefer to hear from those that can contribute in the way I spoke for 45 minutes at second reading. I'd be pleased to repeat so far what I've said at second reading, at third reading, because I think evidence has shown that many of the assumptions have been proven wrong. But I suggest we hear from independent parties from outside the bubble.
All right, I just asked. All right, colleagues. So I want to say thanks to our committee members for your active participation and questions. Also want to take a moment, as I always do, to thank the folks around the room behind us and our colleagues in our offices. Thanks to the interpreters, the debate team transcribing the meeting, the committee room attendant, the multimedia services technician, the broadcasting team, the recording center, ISD, and our page. Thanks very much for being here. So I'll suspend now, and we'll move into in-camera as a full group. And so I call to order this meeting of the Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you here. I'd like to begin by welcoming members of the committee and welcoming our witnesses online and those watching this committee meeting on the World Wide Web. My name is Rob Black, Senator from Ontario, and I chair this committee. I'd like to start by asking the senators around the room to introduce themselves, starting with our Deputy Chair.
Hello, I'm Paula Simon, Senator from Alberta, and I come from Treaty 6 territory.
Good morning, Sharon Bury, Senator for Ontario.
Bonjour. Sénateur de la division de Dormier au Québec.
Good morning, I'm Yuen Pauvu, Senator for British Columbia.
Good morning, I'm Victor O, Senator from Ontario.
Folks, today the committee is meeting on Bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. And our witnesses today are Dr. William David Lubitz, Associate Professor from the University of Guelph, joining us via video conference. Welcome, Dr. Lubitz. And Dr. Chandra B. Singh, Senior Research Chair, Agricultural Engineering and Technology, Lethbridge College, also joining us by video conference. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Singh. We'll begin with opening remarks from Dr. Lubitz, followed by Dr. Singh. You'll each have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. At 1 minute, I'll raise my hand, and that just gives you an idea that you've got about a minute left. If you see 2, it's time to wrap it up. And with that, I'll say that the floor is yours, Dr. Lubitz.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. As mentioned, I'm William David Lubitz. I am faculty at the School of Engineering in the University of Guelph, and I've served there for the past 16 years. My research areas focus on renewable energy and on energy efficiency. And I do a variety of research in those fields, including in hydropower technology. We have several projects as well in greenhouse energy efficiency that are underway. And we've also done some work in grain drying, some of it going back a number of years, looking at improving the efficiency of grain dryers. I'll speak to you today as an individual researcher, not on behalf of the entire institution of the University of Guelph. Our history with the grain drying research in particular goes back at least 8 years. We started a partnership with a farmer and engineer, Greg Deneen of Kenilworth, Ontario, looking to develop possible alternative ways to provide energy to grain dryers. And the alternative we were looking at specifically was using air source heat pumps, which are electrically powered, to provide the conditioned air needed for a grain dryer to operate. We've done a series of experiments over the years, full-scale experiments at his farm, doing different grain drying. And in the last few years, we have entered into a project funded by the Grain Farmers of Ontario that involves building a prototype grain dryer specifically designed to utilize this heat pump approach and sort of maximize the efficiency and potential commercialization opportunities of this sort of new technology. We have also done some related research funded by the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs on the noise emissions from grain dryers, so the environmental noise. And the reason I think this is relevant to this committee is the first part of that research involved a survey of grain dryer operators, both farmers and elevator owners in Ontario. This survey was done in summer of 2021, so we did have some limitations due to COVID restrictions at that time. So it was primarily telephone and internet-based surveying. Admittedly, our sample size were relatively small, but we believe we did get a good overview of the grain drying situation in Ontario. Most of what I know about grain drying and my experience with grain dryer owners and operators is based in Ontario, is particularly in Southern Ontario, the region in which I am at. The survey we did was particularly enlightening. We found a number of interesting things. One thing is we confirmed that all the respondents we spoke to used either natural gas or propane to dry their grain. We confirmed that propane was more expensive than natural gas for those operators. And we confirmed as well that their most significant concerns were about energy, about the cost of it, and also about the security of it. Historically, there have been some interruptions in energy supply, particularly a rail strike several years back that caused propane shortages in parts of Southern Ontario that directly impacted farmers. So we learned a number of interesting things there. To come back to our research on the energy efficiency of grain dryers, we were particularly interested in the non-fossil fuel alternatives, and not only for carbon reduction, but also for energy security and reliability of financial projections if you're farming about the cost of this energy. Fossil fuels are variable in price, and if you're a farmer or elevator operator, you basically have to take that price. Senator Black, do you have a question?
Just a minute. You have a minute to go.
Thank you. So briefly, we only identified two possible alternatives for energy supplies that were not fossil fuels, and that was biomass or biofuels or electricity, which is what we worked on with the heat pumps. I'll note both of those have infrastructure limitations on farms. You need to ensure supply, or you need enough electrical infrastructure to supply the electricity to run it. And we also noted that development will take time. We've been working on this a number of years. We believe this technology has a lot of potential, and we will be able to commercialize it, but we have multiple years to go before we reach a scale where farmers would be able to buy this sort of in quantity or in large numbers. So thank you, Senator Black.
Thank you very much. Dr. Singh, I know it's an early morning for you. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Singh, the floor is yours. You're on mute, Dr. Singh.
Good morning. My name is Chandra Singh. I'm Senior Research Chair in Agriculture, Engineering and Technology at the Lethbridge College, Lethbridge, Alberta. I'd like to thank Honorable Chair and the committee for inviting me. My research focuses on post-harvest storage of grains, including in-bin drying, high-temperature drying, aeration, mathematical modeling, sensing, and automation. My passion for grain storage research is based on the fact that at this very moment, we have over 710 million people worldwide without sufficient food, while we still waste up to 30% of the produced food globally, which could feed additional 1.3 billion people. Canada is among the top grain-producing countries in the world and plays a leading role in providing global food security. However, agriculture production is one of the riskiest business in the world, which I witnessed as growing up in a less than 10-acre farm in northern India. And our producers here are not immune from these risks. Canadian farmers are not only affected by the adverse climatic condition during short production season, but they also face market volatility and trade barriers in the farm exports ban and increased tariffs due to changing geopolitical environment. Recent bans on canola exports and high tariffs on pulse crops are the two big examples. In prairies, 2019 crop year was termed as the harvest from the hell. Team Alberta estimated that unharvested crop losses due to the poor harvest conditions were at $778 million. Cold and wet conditions are always a challenge for harvesting the grain in narrow time window. Any tough grain left undried during winter months leads to the development of hotspots, mold growth, carcinogenic mycotoxins, resulting in grain spoilage and significant economic losses. Therefore, grain must be dried to eliminate the spoilage risk and ensure food security through long-term safe storage. Drying allows farmers to harvest crop early, which mitigates the weather-related risks up to some extent. There is a relatively large energy use and greenhouse gas emission from crop production, which includes farm equipment operations, fertilizers, herbicides, fungicides, and transportation. Therefore, grain spoilage has a large carbon footprint and enormous economic impact. Grain drying in Western Canada is always a race against the time before the winter. Cold air has poor drying potential due to its low water holding capacity. Hence, it must be heated both for low temperature in-bin drying and high temperature drying. Propane and natural gas are the only two practical fuel sources for grain drying in Western Canada. Federal carbon pricing, with proposed annual increase to about 170 ton by 2030, will impact the farmers and ultimately the consumers who are already struggling with high food prices. I strongly support the bill C-234 to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. Here in Western Canada, we are involved in the province-wide grain dry study, which focuses on the energy efficiency and grain quality. So I will be happy to answer more questions and provide more specific information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much to our witnesses today for your opening remarks. We'll begin with asking and answering questions. I'll start with our deputy chair. I encourage everyone not to lean into the microphone so it doesn't affect the sound feedback, negatively impact those around the room. As been our previous practice, we'll have 5 minutes for questions and answers, and we'll go into round 2, 3, and 4 if necessary. So I'll start with our deputy chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Dr. Singh, thank you for reminding me of the terrible summer of 2019, which I referred to in Edmonton as the year without summer. It just never warmed up at all and rained the whole time. I'm curious to know from each of you gentlemen, what alternate technologies you think are the closest to being viable and practical. I met with somebody last night from the propane industry at a hydrogen reception who said that the technology exists right now to create propane made from hydrogen, which would have a very low carbon footprint. And that was the first time I'd heard of that technology. So I'm wondering, what is closest to being viable? Could it be viable within the 8-year sunset clause period? And do you think things are more or less likely to come to market? Would a higher price on carbon be more of an incentive to get technologies available to people in a practical way? And I guess I'll start with whichever one of you wants to go first. Dr. Lubitz, if you want to start, and then Dr. Singh.
Thank you. It's interesting the technologies that are under development. It is difficult to say. We mentioned the heat pump technology we're looking at. There are others working on biomass, and there's other things as well. One could argue some of these are close to being ready for small scale prototype experimental use. But I think the big question here is, when will they be ready for large scale deployment? And I believe some of these will be ready within the 8-year window. But I do not believe in the next year or two. Certainly the project we're on will not reach that in the next year or two, but it has potential in the next 6 or 8 years. And so similarly, I'm not aware of other technologies that are ready for that large scale deployment in the next year or two. It takes a long time to go those steps, to be able to roll out, scale up. This is large infrastructure that takes a long time just to build, test, build again.
It's the chair here. Can you unplug your plug into your computer, your headphone plug, and put it back in again? We're having some difficulties.
I mean, you guys are engineers, so the best way to do anything is to turn it off and start it up again.
Do you want to say a few words for us, please?
Okay.
Can you say a few words?
Yes,
we can't hear you.
I've completed that.
Say a few words now.
That's better.
We'll continue to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
Marvelous. Now, Dr. Singh, over to you. What technologies are closest to being ready? Can they be ready within 8 years? And do you think they might move faster if prices went up?
So to be honest with you, based on the data that I have, and I spend a lot of time on the grain drying project, writing review book chapter papers, and looking at not only Western Canada, but overall, I spent some time back in Australia, where I was associate professor earlier. Before joining the college, I spent time in US, and it doesn't look like there's anything ready, or to me, will be ready in coming years, given the volume that we are talking about here. As each grain bin, for example, is thousands of 50,000 bushels of the grain. That's what in each grain bin has. Each the farmers are getting bigger and bigger. So yes, as Dr. Lubit mentioned, there's work, heat pump, biomass is being used in many Asian countries, but the farm size is very small relatively, so they can use it here. The big challenge for us is that the farm size is very small, and we are, as I mentioned also, is the time. We are in harvest season now, as we getting sometimes get early snow, sometimes rains, too cold, and we don't have any solution that can actually take care of the grain that we have.
Second round.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Simon. Senator Bury.
Thank you for being with us, and I really appreciate having engineers on so we can really drill down to some of the questions. So on September, I think the central issue is the central premise of the bill is that there are no scalable and viable alternatives, and that's what we're trying to sort out. So the other part of that issue, though, is that wherever there are clean technologies, how are farmers able to access these technologies? So I think in September I asked the Agriculture and Ag-Food Canada this question: what percentage of farms were able to access clean technologies? And interestingly, but not surprisingly, they reported to me that only 22% of farms received any funding for clean technologies. However, there was oversubscription of this program, obviously. So from your knowledge, how could this process be accelerated? Because obviously there's a behavioral change of farmers wanting to uptake clean technologies. How can we, through maybe R&D or more programs, could you comment from your vast knowledge of this area? Both witnesses.
Dr. Lubitz, followed by Dr. Singh.
Yes, thank you for that question. Access is difficult. Part of the challenge is this is very long-lived infrastructure and very expensive and time-consuming to install. So if in addition you have capital challenges or you've recently invested in a dryer or other equipment, it's very, very difficult to upgrade it again. Generally, farmers want to improve. They want to reduce energy use. With or without a carbon incentive, energy is expensive. So if there are ways to provide additional capital or other supports, that might be a way to allow the farmers and elevator operators to accelerate their adoption and transition to new technologies or upgrade.
Research and development question in terms of funding for more research and development.
Dr. Singh?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, so one thing, and there are programs, some programs. One example is that the farmers, they can automate their system, in-bin drying system or the grain drying system. They can buy sensing cables, automated control. So that covers 50% of costs, so $100,000. And if you look at any new drying system will cost way more than that. So the incentives that is there is not sufficient or not good enough for motivation for them to switch something, transition, and have the extra capital investment. The other thing is the communication. I talked to some farmers and were not aware of it, that yeah, there is a program where they can assist the extra money. So there are two things that maybe more campaigning from the government side, from this grower association, grower commissions, provincial government, plus also more support. These are the two things. R&D takes time, as also Dr. Lubitz mentioned. So there's requirement for more funding, more focus on this energy efficiency, which is now in the focus. But at least I feel that it has not been so much in discussion, except in 2019 when we had the problem and everyone was struggling at that time. So these are my views.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bury. Senator O, followed by Senator Wu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for your presentation. My question is for Dr. Lubis, and I understand that part of your research with the Dinin farms involve a prototype dryer which use heat collected with an air source heat pump, but you found that the drying rate was slow and the design could not be scaled up to the to keep up with the modern combine. Could you elaborate on these issues?
Yes. The heat pump-based drying that we looked at has several advantages. Heat pumps give you much more heat per unit of electricity than other ways of using electricity. However, they're most efficient when you're only increasing temperatures by small amounts. So the type of drying we're doing is low temperature drying. Most commercial drying is high temperature drying. High temperatures allow faster throughput. So we know this as part of the design, and we're designing the prototype to work best within this limitation. But it will have some limitations on capacity compared to the capacity of the existing large-scale dryers now. There's some other advantages, but that is a limitation. In order to do high temperatures, you need to go to combustion, which brings us back to the propane and the natural gas. This is one of the reasons that those are the fuels of choice on farm.
Okay. You know, over 20 years ago, I tried a heat pump in my house, and I experienced that the heat pump only works when it's above or hovering just under 0 degrees. Has it been improved today, you know, the technology? And I live in the city, you know, in Toronto, and of course, on the countryside, your temperature are much lower. Can you explain?
Yes. First, heat pump technology in general has improved over the past 20 years. They have become more efficient and also more reliable, including operating at lower temperatures. When we are drying grain, we're not normally at those extreme colds in winter. We're normally closer to around freezing, at least in Ontario in the fall when we're drying grain. The other thing is part of our research is you can further optimize the design of the heat pump for the specific application. So we'll make adjustments to the details of the heat pump so it is optimized specifically for delivering air to a grain dryer, which is a little bit different than, say, conditioning a house. So in our initial tests, we've seen some very promising results, probably more so than you might have experienced 20 years ago.
Of not using more on propane. You know, what is the reason why we are not? Canada produce so much propane, and what is the cause of not government do not support fully use of propane, which is the cleaner source, I believe, you know, to burn for the environment?
That might be outside my expertise. That level of detail on fuels. I'm not sure I can provide a lot of information on that.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Wu, followed by Senator Delphine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Lubitz and Dr. Singh. What we've been talking about so far is how to push out the technology frontier by the use of alternative technologies and whether farms can then reach that new technology frontier. But we already have a technology frontier now based on existing technologies. And that technology frontier, insofar as energy efficiency and GHG emissions is concerned, it's not just about natural gas and propane, right? It's also about efficiency, insulation, automation, GPS, better farming techniques, a whole range, a whole suite of technologies and practices that can be applied. We learned, for example, from a witness a few days ago that he had only just upgraded his 70s era dryer to a modern dryer, which I think he said improved efficiency by 30% or more. So my question to both of you is whether you can give us a sense of where most farmers are
in terms of their distance to the technology frontier. Again, I'm not talking about alternative fuels. I'm talking about the suite of efficiency and GHG reducing measures that are available already. For example, are there many farms out there that use 60s, 70s, 80s eras crop dryers still? Please.
Dr. Singh, followed by Dr. Lubitz. You're on mute, Dr. Singh.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so in our project across the Alberta, and it varies a lot where you are. So for example, in Lethbridge, where I am here, my research center is here, this is pretty dry. So none of the farmers would have those modern advanced systems at this point, because most of the year, though sometimes they also face a problem, but they are okay. They can dry the crop in the field or in the bin, and there's a minimum risk. But our partners, the farmers up in the north, in the Peace region, and when I visited first time when we started the project, and I asked, do you dry any grain? And the response was that I dry every single kernel every year. So it depends within such variation within the provinces here. And also it depends on the farm. So some farms, they are very advanced system, as you mentioned, where we still found some where 20, 30 years old systems, and they're still using them. So and efficiency wise, we showed that we are in third year of our study. We showed that yes, if you automate the system, you can save on average 30%, because those are the conditions that with the old system, new systems and approaches monitoring, there's a big difference that we found out how they operate in what conditions. So yes, with automation and newer system, there is a very good opportunity that you can save. And also we are supporting a combination approach where you don't have to dry everything in high temperature dryer where you have to burn a lot of fuel. You reduce the risk, dry a little bit in there, then move to the bin and slowly take care of rest of the moisture. So there are opportunities for the farmers to upgrade their system, to manage in a different way, not in traditional way, to monitor remotely. The sensing technology, automation, everything is in there. It's just focus is not yet there. That there is opportunity for them to upgrade. There is an incentive for them. So I totally agree on this. Yes.
Mr. Lubitz, Dr. Lubitz.
Thank you. I'll just note the surveying that we did in Ontario, we did find a wide range of dryers as well. And I think that is because these are very long-lived pieces of equipment. They're long-term infrastructure, and it takes many years to pay them off. So when farmers have them, they continue to use them. Some farmers reported they would upgrade components in a dryer or add parts instead of completely replacing a dryer. The newer ones are more efficient. And the one other thought is some of the other methods that were mentioned by Dr. Singh, like dry aeration, conditioning the grain in the bins and so forth, sometimes those also require an investment in additional infrastructure, maybe additional bins or grain handling and so forth.
Thank you. We'll move on to Senator Dalfond and then move into round two, unless, thanks. Round two.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our witnesses. Very interesting and helpful comments. Maybe to follow up on the line of the previous questions, I see the advertisement by companies of the new generation of dryer, like the NACO grain dryer, who is saving between 20 and 30% in cost of energy because they are more efficient. I see a program from the Ontario Agriculture Department that suggests to modify existing dryer to add recirculation of air and outside air and cold air. I'm not an engineer, you are, which also save about 30% in the cost of energy, way more than the price on carbon. Are you aware if there's a trend because about farmers switching to that? And I understand from your last comment, Professor Singh, that farmers are not aware of the existence of these things. So could you research and indicate to us how many are converting and what is the potential for immediate conversion while we're waiting for new technologies?
Thank you. Yeah, so number one thing for the farmers to adopt any technology is the cost. So when we talk to them, why don't, and sometimes we have to convince that this is, even they are part of the project, they want to learn, they want to know what's going on at their farm. But the number one question comes, how much it costs to them. So anything that relate to the upgrades, anything, the cost is a big barrier for them. The other thing is they have something working and they think that's fine. Sometimes they play with it, modify or upgrade it. So that's why. They are aware of the technology, some of them. What I said they were not aware was any program, any funding supports for them to upgrade to the system. Other thing you mentioned about the dryer, new dryer, yes, they are efficient, and we have seen at some farms, and that's what we are trying as part of our extension program to reach out to the grower groups through their network and show the results. So hopefully that we are hoping that will change down the line, and there will be more support from the government.
And you say that you are supportive of the bill, but by being supportive of the bill, aren't we sending the message to those that look only at cost and that have something that works, it's fine as long as it continues to work, not to convert or to move to new technologies that are more efficient, or add something to their existing drying systems that makes it more efficient?
So as a researcher, I always explore new ideas. So I'm not against indefinitely, yeah, but in the meantime, there has to be a solution. Grain is something has very limited life. It's cumulative. So say you have 100 days of life of the grain, and if you wasted 50 days or without taking care of it or slow drying or something, then even if you dried it, you invested the fuel, everything, you are left with 50 days. That's my example. So it has to be taken care of.
My question is not that. You're left with 50 days, but if you have a dryer which is more efficient because you just add something to the existing dryer, and you save 30% of your cost, how should we make sure that the farmers will buy into that and add this feature to their dryer?
Yeah, so on our part, that's what we are trying to do, reaching out to them, telling that there's a new system. You mentioned one dryer company, so we are not telling a company or a particular product, but we are telling that, yes, you automate the system, use sensing technology. So you know actually what is your actual moisture in the brain, how much drying is needed, what are your different options, whether you need high temperature dryer, what are your fuel sources, what is the cost. So that's the approach we are trying to develop, and that will be hopefully helpful for the growers, and we will be able to convince that they have to automate to get the benefit and make it more energy.
More time.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I was going to say next round, but I have still more time.
A little bit.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank
We'll
you.
put you on the next round.
So maybe on the same issue, Professor Lubitz, in Ontario, for example, have you seen movement for converting existing dryers or moving to new dryers based on your surveys?
I would say farmers are doing that when they can. So we do see that happening. Again, though, it can be difficult for them to make that decision to do it just because of the costs and the amount of work involved. One thing I would note on the efficiency, some of the efficiency improvements like heat recovery through air recirculation. Sometimes those improve efficiency, but sometimes in practice it was found at a cost of additional labor. You might have to clean the dryer and the heat exchangers regularly, whereas before they did not. So you might save on energy, but you might add costs on labor, for example. Just as an example, it's not necessarily universal, but something to watch for with any new technology. You might save on the energy, but there may be other costs or disadvantages.
Thank you. Moving on to round two, and we've added you. Moving on to round two, Senator Simons, followed by Senator Wu.
So I want to pick up on this theme. As I say, last night I had the chance to be at a hydrogen fuel reception. So of course, people at the hydrogen fuel reception are promoting hydrogen fuel, and that is the purpose of the exercise. But they were making a case to me that you could make propane out of hydrogen, which would then have a much lower GHG consequence. And I was quite excited by that prospect. They explained to me that it's if you convert it to propane, then you can transport it much more easily than you can transport hydrogen. But in order for companies to develop products like that and bring them to market, there has to be an economic incentive that farmers are going to say, okay, well, I'm going to do that. That'll, I won't just get regular propane, I'll get this special greener propane. And I realize that you are engineers and not economists, but you think about systems and how they work together. And I guess my concern is if we are to remove the carbon tax, the carbon levy from these products, will it slow down the adoption and the development of new and alternative technologies? Or does the price signal actually incent more research, more funding for your universities, more companies to do the R&D?
Dr. Lubitz?
Thank you. It's a good question. One thing I wonder about, and I'm also, as you noted, not an economist, but historically there's always been a price signal for the farmers just in terms of the cost of fuel. It's the largest cost of this operation. In some years in Ontario, the energy used to dry corn, for example, can be more than the energy used in all the field operations, the tractors and so forth. So on the accounting already, the farmers see that and they work to reduce it. I guess what I wonder is if is there already a price signal, and at what point can you have an excess price signal, like maybe an unnecessary price signal? And I'm phrasing that as a question because I don't know the answer, but I have wondered about that.
I'd like to interrupt, please. Just again, Dr. Lubitz, can you try plugging in your cord again? There's a poor connection. And testing it. Count.
Can you hear me now?
That sounds much better. Thank you. Just give us a countdown from 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you. Senator Simons?
Yeah, so Dr. Singh, I wanted to put the same questions to you.
Thank you. I have not looked at this alternative from the cost point of view here. And there are two things. One is the direct need something, and then another thing else on the R&D side, which academic institutions, universities, researchers, companies, they always try to be ahead what is in the market. So I think both things can be done before we get something which is, again, realistic applied, but cost will be a big factor. If any incentive is given for the new alternative for the propane from hydrogen, I think industry will adopt, or there is enough timeline given so that there is a smooth transition without any disruption to the current methods of drying.
8-year sunset clause provides a sufficient incentive for people to give themselves an 8-year deadline to get this stuff to market.
That was a question?
Yes, that was a question to Dr. Singh. So do you think an 8-year sunset clause is an effective tool? Should it be a 5-year sunset clause? Should there be no sunset clause? What do you think?
I am not sure because I don't know what stage that development of propane from hydrogen is R&D. I don't know if it takes 3 years, 5 years, and it is ready in a way that farmers can use, maybe, or maybe not. Sorry, I don't have a clear answer for that.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Senator Wu, followed by Senator Delfont.
Thanks again, Chair. Witnesses, I want to go back to this question of the technology frontier. And ideally, I would get you to tell me where farms in aggregate are with respect to the frontier. They're at 60% of the frontier, 80%, and you probably can't give me that figure. But I'm going to frame the question differently. If I were to say to you that you decide to spend all your time in the next few years helping farmers with grain dryers and with barns that require heating, the farms covered under this bill, if you were to spend all your time helping them improve efficiency of energy use and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions through a suite of existing technologies, how busy would you be if that were your only job? And then I have a second question as well, if
Dr.
time
Lubitz,
allows.
followed by Dr. Singh.
Thank you.
It's a very good question. I'm
It's
not
very
sure I
good.
can, not sure I can give the best answer. I think I'd be very busy, and for varying reasons, the communication, the range of possibilities, and the amount of work to be done on these different things.
There's lots to do, essentially, even with the current technology frontier.
Agreed.
Thank you. Dr. Singh?
Thank you. In fact, I'm very busy. This is what my current work is. We are visiting the farmers. We cover almost 1,400 kilometers in one go, different farms, different systems. So as I said, like some are very up to date, very advanced. Some farmers, they're very innovative. They have modified by themselves, but they're people who are as it is, and they're doing the same way that they've been doing in the past. So that's my work, collecting the data, and also to create a benchmark, because we can talk about, there's 30% energy efficiency, how you're comparing where that 30% is coming from. So that's what we are trying to do. We are comparing at the same farm, side by side, bin by bin, dryer by dryer, grain type, same time, where then we are also comparing different farm, different geographic location. There's so many variables, so many things, and that's what my research focus is. It's not just the drying, then we are looking at the quality, what kind of grain you are getting in, what moisture. So many variables are in there. That's what I do, and that's my work is. But yes, upgrade in terms of the storage, monitoring, automation, energy efficiency, and mathematical model. If you combine in that whole as a management tool, there's a very good opportunity that we can maintain the quality, we can maintain the profitability, market competition for the farmers. We can safely store the grain. I'm always concerned about the spoilage because that's where we lose most of.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. There's a lot of work to be done. I don't know if you're aware, Dr. Singh, that the current situation in the absence of this bill already provides for a rebate for the costs of the use of natural gas and propane to farms in aggregate, such that there is no net payment to the Treasury for the pollution pricing paid on propane and natural gas. In other words, farmers in aggregate get all the money back that's paid by them for the price that is imposed on natural gas and propane. I don't know if you're aware of this and if this comes up in your discussions with farmers and how it might affect your thinking around this bill.
No, I'm not aware of what my feel is that their incentive, maybe there's a carbon rebate for other things, how they manage the farm or they get incentive. But to my knowledge, I'm not aware of anything that directly they get subsidized or their refund on this carbon tax.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Wu. Senator Delfont.
Yes, thank you. And maybe to add to the last question of Senator Wu, Professor Singh, those that use more efficient dryers will pay less in costs, but they'll receive the same rebate because it's based on the overall cost of the farm operation. So more efficient you are, more you still get a percentage of your, it's based on the overall cost of operation. So my question is for Professor Lubitz. You did many studies, and I guess you must have realized, as I did when I listened to witnesses, that over 60% of the grains that are dried in Ontario are done by commercial operators and not by farmers. And we heard also that these commercial operators are more efficient in drying grains because they have larger equipments, larger installations. Are you aware of that?
The 60% number you cited, I would agree that was roughly in line with what we would have found as well in our surveying. So I think that is the case, like that level of drying by the commercial operators. We did not specifically ask in our surveying if an operator was commercial or a farm. We asked them more if they were described as an elevator or on farm. So I can't say anything too precisely on that. In terms of the efficiency, one thing that was interesting was we found the costs for fuel between farms and elevators were actually very similar, which surprised us a little bit. We were sort of expecting the elevators to have some sort of leg up on lower fuel costs and so forth. And I think there's wider efficiency variation amongst the elevators and amongst the farms than there is between them. Some farms can be very efficient. I think it depends more on the specific dryer and the specific approaches they use to drying. And there can be very efficient, smaller scale dryers. It's interesting to note in farming, though, a small scale dryer is still one that you supply with, semi-truck size loads of grain. The absolute scale of grain farming and including the drying was one thing that made quite an impression on me when we got into this field.
In your surveys, did you find out what the energy for drying, what the cost represent compared to the overall cost? Because we heard witnesses that referred to less than 1%.
Less than 1% for drying sounds too low. In terms of total farm operations, we didn't ask about total farm operations. We only asked about energy costs for the drying. So I don't know that I can extrapolate out to full farm scale, but I do know on the line items of farms that have to do drying in Ontario, it's probably more than 1%. If you think in Ontario, all the corn that's harvested in Ontario, virtually all of it must be dried, for example, and large parts of the other crops as well, even in a normal year. And in a wet year, this can become very large.
And if we were to exclude the carbon levy from the price of energy, I guess it would be less than 1%.
I don't think that would be the case either. I think it's still more than that. However, I must admit, I'm conjecturing at this point. I don't have the numbers in that granularity, especially related to the carbon levy.
And in your survey, did people saw that it would be an imbalance with that bill, C-234, between those that use commercial dryers, commercial operators to dry their grain versus those that will do it on their own farms?
So I think you're mentioning or referring to that this Bill 234 does not exempt classes of larger commercial operators. I would expect that would increase the costs of the larger commercial operators. But again, we didn't ask questions specifically aimed at that. So.
And you haven't done any research on that aspect?
No, we mainly focused on engineering and energy questions as opposed to costs and policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Delphine. Senator Wu, round three.
Thank you. Can you, Dr. Lubitz, say a little bit more about the variation in efficiency of grain drying between the commercial dryers and the on-farm dryers, within the commercial dryer community, and within the on-farm drying community? I'm just trying to get a sense of how much variation there is and what might account for this variation. Can we start with maybe commercial versus non-commercial?
Yeah, this is actually a difficult question to answer. We noted that there were differences in amounts of energy used and amounts of grain dried. Unfortunately, I don't have the numbers broken down that way with me. We mainly looked at means. It's back in the raw data, but I didn't separate it out that way. Like, I don't have it right now.
But ask you from an engineering perspective, because that's your background. Is there a reason to expect that the commercial grain dryers, higher throughput, economies of scale, maybe better insulation? I don't know. But is it, from an engineering perspective, should you expect that they have a higher efficiency and lesser output of greenhouse gas emissions than on-farm operations?
I'm not sure that I would expect a large difference in efficiency overall. Part of the challenge, and one thing we noted, again, as a newcomer into this field when we started, we can optimize for efficiency as much as we want. But in practice, at least here in Ontario, there's windows of weather for harvest. Winter is coming soon. There's large amounts of grain that needs drying. Often, the dryers must operate in a way that maximizes capacity as opposed to maximizes efficiency. And that includes the commercial dryers. And so there might be differences there too. Part of that is just both on the farms and at the elevators. At those peak harvest times, there's always a capacity limit in the overall drying available. And so it's hard to be maximally efficient if you have trucks backed up and grain that must be dried down so it can be stored.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wu. Senator Delphont, followed by Senator O.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based on you are more specializing in the, surveys are surveys, but what is your field of expertise is the new technologies. Would you say that we should distinguish between drying operation versus eating barns and eating buildings? In terms of improvement to technology, can we say that we are in a world where there's no available alternative to eat farms and barns and farm buildings?
Were you directing that, Senator?
Sorry, Dr. Lubitz.
Thank you. To some degree, they are similar. They both require large amounts of fuel to provide heat. In some ways, they are different. Like it was mentioned earlier, you can insulate a barn. You can potentially do some things with heat exchangers. That's not an avenue in a grain dryer. In both cases, you do need to supply a certain amount of heat from whatever source it came from in order to ensure that the system is working. In practice, it takes a certain amount of energy just to dry grain, to get that moisture to come out of those kernels and take it away. And so similarly, in a cold climate like Canada, you will need to also heat the barns. In the work we've done on greenhouses, and I think at a large scale, this translates to barns as well, whether you have plants or livestock, you also have to do things like remove moisture. It's not just about heating and ventilating. And in order to remove moisture, you have to take that air out and replace it with outside air. So you do end up with sort of minimum energy requirements.
Well, I suppose it's easier to use a heat pump on the farm, on the building, than for the dryers.
In some regards, yes. I would actually say it's a challenge at both. And commercially for the buildings, I'm not sure heat pumps optimized for barns are available widely in the market yet either. Another technology that's evolving. But again, I'm less aware of that field.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator O.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Dr. Lubitz. I was in southwestern coast, Ontario, at the end of August for the Beans Festival, which I met a lot of farmers. And during my 3 days tour over there, I went to a lot of farms and the grain elevator too. And the farmers' feedback to me was they wanted the bill 234 to pass ASAP because they think this is probably a very important bill to them and they need to get this going for energy costs. Have you spoken to any of the farmers up there or they have approached you?
In the course of our work, we have at times spoken with different farmers, both grain farmers and again, in some of these other fields like greenhouse operations. I think the support of this bill was universal amongst everyone who was in farming and used fuel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, I have a question, and there seems to be no other questions. So my last question, my first and last question to our two witnesses is, given that you've both worked with builders and providers of grain dryers, and we've heard about the technology frontier, would we hear anything different than we did today about that technology frontier and where we're at if we heard from other witnesses in the days and weeks to come? Dr. Singh, followed by Dr. Lubitz. You are on mute, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What, to my knowledge, and we reviewed most of the drying systems, at least in North America or Europe. So I don't think we are going to see anything new, disruptive or totally different and offers some magic numbers in terms of energy efficiency or the drying or the costs. No. So these are mentioned the dryer Nico or other companies, they are mixed flow grain dryers. They are much more energy efficient right now. This is the state. I don't expect that there will be something new in short term.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr. Lubitz?
I never like to say never. Again, if you talk to additional people, you always learn something. But I wouldn't expect you get a large amount of new information or new things going on. Our observation was if you want to transition grain drying to a non-fossil fuel, it's going to be electricity or some form of biomass or biofuels. And even using those, you still are going to need to supply a significant amount of energy to do this process. There's a lot of interesting things going on and being developed. But coming back to, I don't think there's technology in those areas quite yet that's widely available for farmers to start adopting right now. And it will take some time for them to adopt increased efficiency and to adopt these technologies as they develop in the coming years.
Thank you very much. That's my question. So with that, I'd like to thank our witnesses today for your participation in the meeting. Your assistance in the committee's examination of this bill is very much appreciated. And thank you for joining us at a very last minute time period. We appreciate it. Thanks to committee members for your active participation and thoughtful questions. I'd also like to thank, as I often do, the folks that are behind the scenes, interpreters, debate staff, committee room attendant, multimedia service technician, broadcasting team, the interpreters, the recording center, ISD, and our page here in the room today. Thank you very much for your help. Colleagues, our next meeting is planned for Tuesday, October 17 at 6:30, where we will proceed to clause by clause consideration of this bill. Committee members who intend to propose amendments are encouraged to consult the office of the Senate Law Clerk to ensure any amendments are drafted in the proper format in both official languages. Also helpful to send your amendments in advance to the clerk of the committee. This will allow the clerk to organize and distribute copies at the appropriate time in the meeting. Please note that your amendment will be treated in a confidential manner and will not be distributed prior to the meeting unless you wish it so. After clause-by-clause consideration, the committee may wish to append observations to the report. It's recommended that members provide a prepared text of any draft observations, and the text should be short, must be in both official languages, and the clerk can assist you in translation if necessary. With that, thanks again to everyone for being here. If there's no other business, Honourable Senators, this meeting is adjourned.